3 important things they should teach in high school but don't. Part 2. First thing, auto insurance. Everybody knows you need a driver's license to drive, and everybody knows you need to pay your registration every year. So you get that little sticker on your license plate that tells the nice police officer behind you not to pull you over. The third thing everybody needs is auto insurance. And most folks right out of school are going to go by the minimum limits because that's what allows you to drive on the road, and that's about as far as the conversation goes. Well, you may want to consider looking at the other parts of the auto policy. When you get minimum limits, you're buying insurance for the other person, for the person that you run into, the person you injure. It doesn't cover you or your car. So what you may want to look at if you have a car and it has value, and you can't just run out and buy another one, is comprehensive and collision insurance. And what this is collision insurance is when you run into somebody, it'll pay, or someone runs into you, it'll pay to repair your vehicle. Comprehensive is everything else. If a tree falls on your car, if it gets vandalized, the insurance company will pay to fix your car. So go get quotes on those in case you can't afford to just go out and buy another car. Now, if you got a new car and you're financing it, the finance company is going to require you to have comp and collision on it, so you're already covered there. The second thing to look at on your insurance policy is uninsured and underinsured motorist. It's a fact there's a lot of uninsured people running around. If you get into an accident with someone who's uninsured and you are injured, your uninsured motorist portion of your policy will pay for your injuries. It'll pay to make you whole. And underinsured motorist is very similar. That means somebody hits you, they cause more damage to you than their policy limits. So your underinsured motorist coverage picks up the gap and pays you. So the second thing that they should teach in high school but don't is about marriage. Now, everybody knows all the good, wonderful parts of marriage, so I don't need to talk about that. What I do want to talk about briefly is if you live in a community property state, like I live in Nevada here, it's a community property state. Next door, California, it's a community property state. Essentially what that means is when two people are married, the marital community owns everything. So for example, if Chris and Pat get married and Chris goes and buys a house for $200,000 while they're married and pays 100% of the house, well, it's not just Chris's house, it's Chris's house and it's also Pat's house because it was purchased during the time of the marriage, even though Pat didn't contribute $1 to the house. Now, it also works the other way. If Chris and Pat are married and Pat runs up $20,000 in credit card bills, well, those bills were accrued during the time of marriage. So even though Pat ran up the bills, according to the community property law, Chris would also be responsible for that $20,000 in bills. So this has some interesting results. I was involved here in a lawsuit in Nevada. There was a person that was a massage therapist. He was accused of improperly touching. He was a male. His client was a female. He was accused of improperly massaging her, and a jury found that to be true. And so there was a large verdict of many thousands of dollars against this massage therapist for improperly touching his female patient. Well, because of the verdict, he lost his license, he lost his job, he wasn't making any money anymore. But there's this big judgment against him. Well, it turns out he was married and his wife was making pretty good money. So because of the community property laws, his wife ended up having to pay part of her income to the woman that her husband improperly touched. And needless to say, their marriage didn't work out very well after that. But certainly that's a risk that you have to consider. So anyway, the third thing to think about that they don't teach you in high school is what the heck is a premarital agreement or a prenuptial agreement. And what that is a contract that modifies state law based on the agreement of the parties. And it's hard. It's kind of like you're planning for your divorce before you get married, and nobody really wants to do that, but here's why it's important. A premarital agreement can talk about how property is divided after a marriage. It can talk about how much alimony a spouse is going to be paid by the other spouse. and it can talk about what assets each person has going into the marriage and which assets they will retain after the marriage. Now, usually these are important when one person or both people are coming into the marriage with significant assets. Maybe they're coming in with children from prior relationships. And although the last thing you want to do when going into a marriage is talk about divorce and what might happen, everyone knows that, I don't want to say most, about half marriages fail, but there's more statistics to that, according to Forbes anyway. They say that 67% of second marriages fail and 73% of third marriages fail. So even though this isn't something that people want to do when they're getting ready for a wonderful marriage, statistically, you probably should. So at least consider a premarital agreement before you get married and give it some thought before you take the plunge. Thanks very much for watching.